That is the hope, and that's certainly the hope of crypto. I want to get to one other criticism that's maybe of this idea that's maybe more
Sure.
near term, and that is the idea of like Balaji. But what about everyone who is not wealthy? Okay, in the short
Oh,
run,
yeah.
what you're talking about maybe to someone's ears comes off as like, oh, cool, the crypto bros they want to go create another nation state, and it's going to be like another Bored Ape yacht, and only the cool kids can come, and it's just for the wealthy sort of tech elites of the world. It's not going to help the average individual citizen in an emerging country. What do you say to
Yeah.
this criticism?
So I reject this one completely. And let me kind of go root and branch on that, right? So the first observation is America isn't just a nation of immigrants, it's a nation of emigrants, right? Meaning something like 90% or so of the US left. They left Poland, they left India, they left Vietnam, they left Mexico, they left wherever to come to the US. And in their leaving, they weren't necessarily rich. In fact, many of them were not rich, right? They were actually folks who were locked out of their existing political system, and that's why they left. In fact, the whole concept of, quote, the rich and the poor is actually too simple because a good way of thinking about it, Peter Turchin talks about this, is there is, there's the masses, there's the elite, and then there's a counter elite. And the counter elite, for example, of San Francisco, the tech folks lost. Because they lost to the political elite, they had to leave. That is and the political elite are pretty darn rich. If you go and look at the political elite of San Francisco, they're quite wealthy, but they're not just wealthy, they're powerful, they're politically powerful. So the folks who are leaving are not the rich, they're the politically poor. Okay? They're the politically powerless because if they had political power, why would they leave? They would just transform the society as they saw fit. Right? So once you add that other axis where there's a significant power deficit, and one way I kind of, to take this to like extremists, was Stalin rich? It kind of breaks the scale, right? Stalin was powerful. Was he he could command anything in the USSR. He could basically like hit a button and get root on any tank or whatever that he wanted. People waited on him hand and foot, but he didn't carry cash to pay for things. He just seized things. He had power, but not money. That's the extremist example of showing that political power is not the same as money. And in fact, if you were some poor, wealthy guy in the Soviet Union, Stalin would liquidate. He was definitely more powerful than you. You'd leave. You'd be a kulak. You'd be denounced as, quote, wealthy. And so the whole thing about, oh, the wealthy, blah, blah, is meant to, I think, usually obfuscate who has political power. And the political elite versus the tech elite or mercantile elite, that is this eternal sort of dance, right? And that's the dance in I think that's coming up, that's already ongoing between the cloud and the land, right? So that's kind of one or a couple of major reframes. The first is that if the US is a nation of immigrants, it's also a nation of immigrants. And that means the most American thing in the world is to leave your home and search for a better life. So probably that person who's saying this, you ask them whether they would denounce their ancestors and where they betrayed, they were super rich to leave Poland or Germany or Vietnam or South America or Mexico or India. Were they super rich? No, they were not, right? They left because they lacked political power in some key way. Sometimes that was, literally fleeing like genocide or war or revolution. Sometimes it was just searching for economic opportunity, but they didn't have the political power to drive that at home. Okay, so that's one. Number two is, even if it's only a small group of people that leaves, the frontier shows reform for everybody else. Only a small percentage came to the United States, and that like had so many reforms, so many new things that the world benefited from, right? Only a small percentage of people left to go and join Google. That created all this good stuff for a time for the whole world, even if it's become evil now. And so the percentages don't necessarily matter so much as the example to show on a new, bit of terrain that you can do better than the old society. If keto kosher worked, if there were, that is that example of that one commandment, if that society worked, if you had before and after photos with all these people who are, going from fat to fit, or at least, dropping weight, that would be copied, right? You're actually doing something for the common good by shouldering the risk as this startup society, figuring out all the bugs and setting an example for the rest of the world in a consensual way, 100% consensual. It's 100% democracy, not 51%. 51% democracy is 49% dictatorship. The 51% is basically dictating to the 49%. Whereas in a startup society, everybody's chosen to be there. Everybody builds that example, and then anybody else can adopt that example should they see fit.
That this
Right?
example point is really interesting because I was gonna add another critique to the pile here of like you're talking about basically I'm envisioning this kind of castle of classical liberalism, freedom and property rights and these sort of things for the individual, and we're in a castle wall. What's coming is kind of this army against that idea of authoritarianism, right? And what you're also inviting in the network state idea is that people abandon the castle wall, essentially opt out, stop defending it. And like the question here is, or the criticism here is, Balaji, we can't, if all of the good people leave, all the people with strong convictions, strong values about these Western ideas of democratic representation, if they leave for the network state, then the existing democratic nation state, the West, as it were, will erode even faster. And what is
Well,
the
so
argument
and
to
a
that?
few
Is it
and
things.
leave
still
them in
is
the
it still
hands
the
of nuclear
example?
bombs.
Yeah, but there's a sleight of hand there, right? The most important word there in that thing was all. All? You know how hard it is to get people to move? It's not even going to be close to all. It's like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of people that will do this. I'd be extremely, I think think about it, it'd be incredibly impressive to have a 1 million-person network state, which is not even close to all. That's like less than 1/1000th of the world population by like 2030. That'd be insanely impressive, right? So the concept of Balaji, your concept is so ridiculously persuasive that everybody is going to drop everything and do it right. It's not going to happen, right? It's going to be something that there are some good concepts there, but we will see, like gradual exit. Now, with that said, after critiquing all, let me try to steelman it and give, a different thing, which is they're like, well, if everybody leaves, who is there to maintain? Well, who's there to maintain BlackBerry? Who's there to maintain Barnes& Noble? Who's there to maintain Blockbuster? Some old institutions should pass such that others can be born, right? And, who's there to maintain, I don't know, the place, the town where the, Puritans left in England, right? Ain't there, right? Just, basically, but the thing is, and this is crucial, what I'm trying to set up in the book is something where the new societies are better than the ones that were left. They are attracting people because they are better. Everybody, there's a continuous vote of confidence in these societies because people are staying there and not leaving, right? It is a continuous plebiscite. And it's not just on a 2 or 4 year election cycle. It's not with politicians who have non-binding campaign promises. This is the most binding campaign promise of all. You know why? When that president of a startup society advertises their startup society as what it is, and you come there, and if it doesn't match, you leave, right? By contrast, you have no recourse when a politician scams you out of a vote. And we are so used to them doing that, where you vote on the basis of, I think they will do X, Y, and Z, and they do A, B, and C, or then they don't do anything at all. And then they can always say, oh, I was blocked by these other people. Point is, if you invest in a CEO, or you buy a product and they give blah, blah excuse that's why, you ordered orange juice, they gave you milk. That's just breach of contract, right? You're just going to go and find a different CEO, right? And a different product. And so all of that concept of recourse, of optionality, all these things that we know are just so crucial to making markets function, to making lots of aspects of society function. People are actually over moralitied when it comes to the existing system. And the reason they are, by the way, and I argue the reason they are, is because they see no alternative, right? Once they see an alternative, I mean, notice how actually in some ways, the commentary on the Fed was much more passionate in the early 2010s than it is now, right? I'm not saying it won't wrap up again, but over the 2010s, everybody who just really disliked the Fed and thought it was unjust just exited for crypto and built a better system. And now that is there as a life raft to take over when the previous system collapses. Because it is not always true that just more effort will prop up that existing system. Sometimes it's the Titanic. And that's just throwing good money after bad, good talent after bad. Having people being able to build that life raft and realizing that this person's estimation of their abilities as a reformer, they may be wrong. Sometimes you just cannot, go clear and bring them back to life, right? It's very important that there's diversity of opinion and that somebody can go and have this Minority Report and start something new, because you might rely on that. Look at, like, what happened with COVID, when all the delivery apps and all the things that all these journos had made fun of, they relied on them. They needed them, like, to do things. And they were so, there's a period where they showed some gratitude for the first time in their life. But it was something where they're like, oh, I'm so glad that these, apps and so on exist, that it's a lifeline. Now, it turned out, with lockdown and so on and so forth, you can critique many aspects of that, and whether any non-pharmaceutical intervention even work. Point being, though, that all these things that people thought of as toys or not a big deal became absolutely essential.
Right.
Right.